Hey guys, and welcome back to another art video. You know, this whole starting to teach on YouTube thing has really got me thinking, I've got to start worrying a lot more about my image. I mean, I'm a big YouTuber right now, so I really have to start dressing a lot fancier if I want to fit in with the rest of these guys. So, I got some nice little clout goggles here, and I got this really nice coat. Ooh. Man, this is a really soft coat. I gotta say, this big coat here has a really nice texture. Man, wearing a big fuzzy coat at the beginning of May in Arizona. Not my best idea. So you guessed it, today we're talking about texture. Now, for those who don't know, texture is how something feels, or in art words, how something looks like it feels. There's so many different kinds of textures out there that all feel different and that all look different. I mean, just right here, there's fluffy textures like my coat. It's so fluffy! There's soft textures like this blanket here. There's rough textures like my sandpaper right here. And there's sharp, spiky textures like this fork right here. Sorry. There's so many different kinds of textures that we can find even just in where we're living right now. You can probably find so many different countless examples of textures just by looking around your room right now. Okay, I do a lot for you guys, but I really don't think I can sit this whole video in this coat. I think I'm gonna have a heat stroke. So we've talked about how there's a ton of different types of texture, like fluffy and rough. But in art, there's actually two distinct words that we use to describe what kind of texture we're working with, and it's very important for us to make sure we know the difference between the two. The first one that we're going to talk about is called tactile texture. Try saying that 5 times fast. Tactile texture, tactile texture. Anyway, tactile texture is any kind of texture that we can physically feel with our hands. So, anytime that you grab something around your room, like any of the examples that I showed you earlier, and you can grab it and feel it, and you can actually feel the different texture, whether it's soft or hard or rough, anything like that, that is what we call a tactile texture. Now, sometimes paper itself or canvases can have a different tactile texture as well. One example is something called watercolor paper. So if you actually feel watercolor paper, it feels a lot rougher. So that means it has a different tactile texture. The other kind of textures that we really need to know about is what's called visual texture. Now, unlike tactile texture where you can actually physically feel the different texture it is, this is a kind of texture that looks like it should feel a certain way, but it actually only just feels like paper. It looks like it has a different texture, but it doesn't. So let's take this picture for example. Now, looking at this picture right here, how would you say it would feel like if you touched it? Very good. So if you said that this looks like it has a rough texture, you're totally wrong. So it does look like it should have a rough texture, but if you went out and started touching your computer screen, you would find that it doesn't actually feel rough. You would just be touching your computer screen. And honestly, you might look kind of weird just putting your hands all over your computer screen in the middle of the day. But hey, that's quarantine for you. So any kind of drawing that looks like it has one of the textures of a tactile texture, like fluffy, rough, spiky, anything like that, but it actually doesn't feel that way, that's what we call visual texture. Now, artists use visual texture all the time in the drawings to make them look a lot more realistic. So they use different kinds of techniques to make their drawings look like they have the texture that the object that the drawing has in real life. They especially like to use lines and value, which we just learned about a couple weeks ago, and we'll go over it a little later on. Now, we talked a lot about how artists can start to make visual texture to make their drawings look like they have real tactile texture. And one way that we can start to practice how we can use value and line in our visual texture drawings is with a little activity called rubbings. Now, this is an activity that's very popular, and it's a good chance that a lot of you guys have done this activity before, but just in case you forgot how to do it, or if you still need some help remembering it, I'm going to show you very quickly how to do it. So what I want you to do is I want you guys to find an object either around your house, maybe outside somewhere if you go to the park, or if your house or apartment complex has outside areas. I want you guys to find some kind of natural object. So it could be a leaf, it could be a feather, it could be anything that has a nice texture on it. Now, unfortunately, I have a whole bunch of rocks around where I am, so I couldn't really find a leaf, but I was able to find this cool little fake shell on the ground, which is really cool. And if you look at the fake shell right here, it has a really nice rough bumpy texture. Kind of goes up and down, up and down, up and down. So I'm going to see what I can do when I rub on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a paper that isn't too thick, so I suggest maybe some printer paper, and it doesn't need to be a clean sheet. So if you have an old piece of paper like I have here, you can use the back of it. So all you do is turn to the side that doesn't have writing on it. You lay it right on top of your object. And then what you're going to do is you can either get a pencil or another drawing utensil. I'm going to use a crayon. I always think crayons work really well, but if you don't have it, a pencil works really well. You're going to hold down your paper. You're going to take your crayon and you're going to use the side of your crayon, and you're just going to put some value right on top of your object, and you'll start to see that it'll start picking up the texture and make a little rubbing of it. So let's watch real quick. Alright, so as you can see, my crayon picked up the texture of the shell, and it looks almost exactly like the shell that's underneath. Now, one thing I want to point out to you is you notice that the way that this shows a visual texture and how it still looks like it's bumpy is that the parts of the shell that are standing up are nice and dark. Meanwhile, those sort of ridges where they kind of go down and it's kind of in between the bumps is light. That is a way that we can show that there's different bumps all along the shell. So that is one way that we can show visual texture using rubbings. So after looking at the rubbing activity, we're going to be thinking about how we can use value and line in a more complex drawing. And one thing that I get requests a lot from my students is, how do you draw nice realistic hair? Hair is something that's incredibly hard for a lot of people to draw, but if you think about how we use line to create texture, it actually is not too hard. Now, we're going to focus on two different types of texture that we see on a face. So here I just drew a random kind of cartoony face, and if you want to add a little more texture to it to make it look realistic, there's two different distinct textures that are on a face. Number one is the hair, which has more of like a rough, silky texture depending on the type of hair, but we want it to look nice and have lots of hair in it and have that silky texture to it. And another texture that you have is the smoothness of skin. So we're going to first look at how we can look at the hair and make it look like realistic hair, and then we'll go back and do the skin. So for those who have taken my classes before, hopefully you guys remember this, but just in case, the main way that we can make, oh man, I'm losing my mind in quarantine. Anyway, so one way that we can make really good realistic hair is just by using lines. So what I want you to do is I want you guys to follow the flow of the hair. So here I have this girl, she kind of has these nice little buns at the top of her hair. Very kawaii, as the kids say. So what you're going to do is you're going to follow the form of her hair. And you see how I'm not just making straight lines, I'm doing very nice light lines that curve up to make it look like the hair is going around. So I'm going to do that, and I would start off light, and you see it's already starting to have that texture of hair. Now it's not going to feel that way because it's visual texture, but you can go around. You can do this with her whole hair all throughout her body, and you can even start going a little faster, as long as all the lines are starting to go in the direction of her hair. Let me speed this up super quickly. Okay, so we just fast forward a little bit, and now I've covered her whole hair in this hair texture, which looks good, but there's one way that we can actually make it look even better, and that is using value. So if you remember from our value lesson, things that have this sort of volume to it, some areas are darker and some are lighter, and the same goes for hair. If you were to look at your hair, there's areas of light and areas of dark. So what I would suggest you do is you go right here and you pick which areas you want to be darker. So I want to leave this little area light, and then these are going to be my darker areas. And then all you do, kind of like hatching, you just go over and over again and make those areas darker. And if you see, I'm leaving that area nice and light, so it looks like there's light reflecting on her hair, which actually will make it have a more silkier appearance. You could do that up at the buns as well. So I'm going to leave this area light. So that means everywhere around it, I'm going to add another layer of lines right on top of it so it gets darker. And you can even go through, if this isn't light enough for you, just use your eraser and erase it a little bit. And add some very light lines still. So you do that, and then on this side you could do the same thing. I'm going to have the light right here, so make this part dark, make this part dark, and you can go over it multiple times and it will still have that texture to it, and you'll make it darker. So that is how we do semi-realistic hair. Now the more you practice this, the better you'll get at making it look super realistic. But for right now, this is a really good start. Now, this next part's going to be a lot easier than the hair. I always say, let's do the hard stuff first. So, if you want to make the face look smooth, all you have to do is just add very nice light value. And again, some areas are going to be darker, some are going to be lighter, and that's going to give it a sort of roundness to it, while also showing that her skin is smooth. And if you remember the smudging technique, you can use a paper towel, a tissue, anything like that, and just rub right here. And there you go. You can do this all throughout. I always like to kind of stylize it a little bit, maybe put a little bit of smudging on her nose, around the eyes, and this is going to show us that yes, this has volume, there's weight to this face, but it's smooth. It's not like the hair where there's a whole bunch of lines to show us that there's hair all throughout this. So this is a very good way just to add very simple texture to your drawings that are going to make your portraits look a million times better. But that is going to do it for us today. I hope you guys learned a little something new about texture. But if you still are unsure on how to finish your packet for this week, don't worry. Feel free to come to one of our office hours, which we have every day from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. or just email me directly and I'll hopefully be able to answer any questions that you guys might have. But other than that, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are staying inside where it's nice and safe. And I especially hope you guys aren't getting too bored out there. Until next time, we'll see you guys later. Peace out, Girl Scouts.